So let us take these big, beautiful new Pew Bibles that are large print and make sure as many of you have them as possible. And turn to Genesis 18. Genesis 18. Because the verse we're going to focus on today, could we get the screen back to Hebrews 13, please? Is in the second verse, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. Angels unawares. That's our story today. So now we'll go back to Genesis 18. Genesis 18. We don't have to read it, but I just want you to know it's there, so you know I'm not making it up. So Abraham is at the door of his tent. He sees three strangers. He responds extravagantly. He greets them. He offers to wash their feet. He says to Sarah, make some food. Let's serve them lunch. This is one of the Bible's foundational stories about showing hospitality to strangers. And what does it turn out? That the strangers are? Angels unawares. The first thing is, of course, in these kind of stories, and you may remember a story from ancient Greece about how Zeus came disguised as a poor man to a couple, and the couple were kind to Zeus. As a result, Zeus, when it was over, revealed himself. Do you know this story? And said, you all have given me this kindness, now I'll grant any wish you want. And they said, let us die together. And at the end, Zeus, when they died, made sure they were trees, and they were trees who grew intertwined. So this is a kind of ancient story people tell about how you never know. You never know who you're dealing with. You should treat strangers with the possibility they are angels unawares. Now, what do these strangers then do for Abraham and Sarah in this story? They solve a problem for Abraham and Sarah. Abraham and Sarah assumed there was nothing new to discover in life. And I have to admit, this is my special secret mission with this congregation. To convince people, I don't have to convince them, but to somehow light the fire, pass on the spark that says, you may think there's nothing new. You may think there's no new chapters. You may think there are no new characters. You may think there's no new story. But if you are on a spiritual journey with God, there is always newness. Sarah and Abraham thought they were just playing it out. Just kind of hanging in there, same old, going through the same stuff every day. But one day it began simply with strangers appearing. And they opened themselves to something new. And as a result, one of those strangers said to Sarah, I'll be back in about a year. Well, actually in 9 months, Sarah. And at that time, you're going to have a new child. And how did Sarah respond? She laughed. And so, as a result, the child was named Laughter, Isaac. But you see, they entertained the angels, not knowing they received a blessing too. About 2 months ago, my son Tommy, some of you have seen Tommy, and Tommy is a fine specimen of a person. He's going to make it. I'm confident he's going to be a human being someday. Right now he's 16. Yeah. He's still a work in progress. But I like Tommy. I like the way he's growing. Tommy came to me one day and said, "Dad, some foreign people came to the house today. And I couldn't understand a word they said, but I think they wanted to sit in our lawn chairs." I said, "Well, what'd you say?" He says, "Well, I tried to communicate to them. That's fine if they wanted to sit in our lawn chairs." A few days later, sure enough, I saw them. As it turns out, there is a Russian couple, an elderly Russian couple, who have shown up in my neighborhood. They're visiting their grandchildren. Every day they take a walk. And every day, when they get to my house, they need to stop and rest. And so now every day, they sit in lawn chairs under a tree in my yard. And they play cards. So now I've got this elderly Russian couple who have just decided that my house is their caravan stop, their oasis in the desert of a summer walk. Now, since then, we've gotten to know each other, although we can't communicate. But they communicate great gratitude to me, and I communicate great hospitality to them. And one day, the woman brought me some food, too. So anyway, here are my angels unawares, right? So one day, the man begins to try to communicate something to me, and he's pointing to a tree in the front yard. And he's going, yeah, and he's saying something. He's speaking in Russian. I mean, what he's saying makes perfect sense if only I knew Russian. But he wanted me to notice the tree. And as it turns out, when I looked up at the tree, there was a split in the tree. The tree, which is beginning to lean toward Parker Street, toward the street in front of my house, where there's huge power lines, and it now has a split in it. The next day, you could see air between the parts of the tree. And in fact, over the next week, it was as if there was a hinge on the back side of the tree, and the tree was opening, ready to fall. So I called the landlord. The landlord had the tree removed, and this was just last Wednesday, the tree was removed. And this morning I thought, the weather this morning would have brought that tree over. It would have, if anyone had been passing by in a car, it would have killed them. It would have pulled down the power lines. It may have even reached the house across the street. So that Russian couple, they were my angels. There are other stories in the Bible about angels unaware. So, part of this is, as Christians, we're supposed to walk around with special glasses. Everyone else is just seeing normal reality. We see with X-ray spiritual eyes. And we see that every person we encounter is a potential angel. Jesus says, remember the time Jesus said, when everything is said and done and we're all standing before the great judge, The great judge will say, I was in prison and you visited me. I was sick and you helped me. I was hungry and you gave me bread. And we'll say, but Lord, when did we do that? And the Lord says, all those times you saw that poor person, you saw that prisoner. That was me. It was an angel unawares. The spiritual life involves living like this. Could you imagine? It takes the eyes of faith. Again, you have to understand you are on a journey. There is more yet to be written in your story. You haven't arrived yet. God is not through with you yet. Do not think it's same old, same old. If you are a disciple of Jesus Christ, it is never same old, same old. Behold, all things can become new. This is the trick, to live with eyes looking for something to happen. Now, there's another story in the Bible about an angel unawares, and it's not such a happy one. It takes place in Genesis 32. And it says, one day a man named Jacob was down at a river at midnight by himself. Muriel, Genesis 32. She's not. Did she get it? All right. Genesis 32, Jacob, and it says all of a sudden a man attacked him. Anita, you looked at me like, really? But you haven't heard the story of Jacob wrestling with the angel? Now here's the key to that story. This is an angel unawares, but this isn't some sweet story about the angel that tells you your tree is falling. This isn't a sweet story about the angel that says you're going to have a baby. This is a story about an angel who wrestles with you, who causes you adversity, who causes you conflict. In this case, is Sean still here? Yeah. Now, the incredible thing about this story is Jacob survives this attack by an angel. But Jacob doesn't survive because he's smart. Jacob doesn't survive because he's righteous. You should read all the stories about Jacob. Jacob was not a righteous person. He was a trickster. He was a manipulator. He was a con artist. He was an operator. But Jacob survives this attack because he is too stupid to let go. Because he refuses to let go of his adversary. And even though he's being defeated, finally, as it turns out, this angel has to go when the sun comes up. And the angel then says, let me go. And he says, not until you give me a blessing. There are people in our lives who are a different kind of angel, who present conflict for us, who present problems for us, who are not easy for us. They could also be agents of our spiritual growth. The key is to hang on until you find the blessing, until you find the lesson. Even difficult people can be opportunities for us to grow. If you approach them with the eyes of faith and see they could be angels unaware. There's one more angels unaware story in the Bible that I'm thinking of right now. The truth is there are several more, but there's just one more I want to mention, and it happens in the Gospel of Luke. And it's perfect as we prepare to take our communion this morning, because it says that after the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus, 2 of the disciples were leaving Jerusalem and walking to a town called Emmaus. I preached about this one time last year, and if you remember, just think about it. These 2 disciples walking on that same path where some of the palm fronds are still there from the week before, when we had the great triumphal entry, and how everything is completely changed and seems so confusing now. Even though it seems that Christ has been raised from the dead, the disciples haven't figured all that out yet. It's still shocking to them. They don't know what to make of it. It's confusing to them. And these 2 men are walking, and then a stranger joins them. And they begin talking. And when they're near the end of their journey, near Emmaus, it says that the stranger walked in front of them. And if you remember how we interpreted that story last year, it seems that that stranger, who was Christ, as they were getting ready to reach their destination, the stranger politely, courteously made space, separated himself from them so they wouldn't assume the stranger was just trying to get a free lunch. And that, of course, is its own incredible story, that the eternal Word of God, Jesus Christ, would still be so modest, would still say, I never force myself in, I only come in when you invite me. It says that Jesus moved away as they got close to the destination, just so they wouldn't assume Jesus was forcing an invitation out of them. But then they did say, join us. And it says that it was in the breaking of the bread that they realized it was Christ. In the breaking of the bread. My prayer this morning is, as we break the bread, you will encounter the Christ, the living Christ, who is with us, but comes sometimes as a stranger. May God bless our communion together.